What's up guys? Today I'm going to be telling you everything you need to know about bulking. That is the who, what, where, when, why, how, answer every question you guys can think of. So without any further ado, let's just get into it. So who is bulking? You, my friend, are bulking because you've decided you want to put on muscle. You don't know what to do. Well, luckily you're in the right place because I'm a seasoned veteran when it comes down these roads. I've bulked many times myself, 4 to be exact. But this video is just going to talk about the basics of bulking, what it is, why you should do it, when you should do it, and how you should do it in order to set it up most effectively. So what is bulking? Bulking is simply eating in a calorie surplus to gain weight. Now, what is a calorie surplus? A calorie surplus is just eating more calories than you burn per day. Now, how do you figure out how many calories you burn per day? Well, basically everyone has what's called a basal metabolic rate, which is just how many calories you burn at rest. So even though you're not doing anything, your body will still burn calories through just basic functions that are necessary to keep your body alive. So like breathing, regulating your body temperature, circulating your blood, things like that. But obviously no one sits in bed all day and does nothing. So in order to figure out how many calories you actually burn, you need to take your basal metabolic rate and add it to any calories you burn through exercise or walking around or anything like that. And luckily you don't actually have to do this yourself. There's tons of free online calorie calculators that you can use. I'll leave some down below in the description. Basically you just type in like your height, gender, age, it'll plug it into these fancy formulas and shoot out a number. That number that comes out is called your maintenance calories. This is the point where the amount of calories you consume equals the amount of calories you burn. So you're not going to gain or lose any weight, you will just maintain your weight. But eating anything above this number of calories will cause you to gain weight because again, now you're in a calorie surplus where the amount of calories you eat is greater than the amount of calories you burn. And the idea behind this is that a calorie surplus paired with proper training in the gym will speed up muscle growth. And even though you will gain some fat, you will eventually lose it, since after a long period of bulking usually precedes with a short period of cutting, which is when you eat less calories than you burn, which is known as a calorie deficit. In order to lose weight, shred off any fat you gain during your bulk and reveal your muscle. So now that you know what bulking is, I just want to talk about the 2 different types of bulking. And I'm sure many of you have heard both of these terms before, and that is a lean bulk versus a dirty bulk. Now when I say a lean bulk versus dirty bulk, a lot of people think, oh, just lean bulk just means you're eating healthy, whereas a dirty bulk is just eating unhealthy. And while there is some truth to that, it doesn't really paint the entire picture. So I just want to kind of clear up and explain what both of them are. So a lean bulk is when you eat in a very small calorie surplus, so like 250 to 500 calories. You gain significantly less weight, so like maybe 0.2 to 1 pound per week, which is like 1 to 3% of your total body weight per month. And the idea behind this is you want to maximize the amount of muscle tissue you put on as opposed to just gaining excess fat. And you do this through eating healthier options, nutrient-dense foods, avoiding foods that are really heavily processed, and including a lot of whole foods. And dirty bulking is pretty much the exact opposite. It utilizes a much higher calorie surplus, so like 500 to 1,000 calories over your maintenance. You're gaining like 2 or more pounds a week, 5% of your total body weight per month. And you're pretty much eating whatever you can get your hands on. So even if it's heavily processed, high in added sugars, high in saturated fats, you're just eating it regardless. And obviously I don't recommend this approach, but I'm just kind of explaining to you guys what it is. And the idea behind this method is as you gain more weight, you obviously gain more muscle. However, even though you're gaining more muscle, you're also just gaining a significant larger amount of fat. And it's also worse for your nutrient partitioning, which is basically how your body utilizes energy. So as you intake more calories, some of those calories will be used to create new muscle tissue and some will be stored as fat. And the more calories you're eating over your maintenance, the more calories that will be stored as fat. Basically, your muscle to fat ratio will be worse the more calories over your maintenance you consume. So if you're eating in like 1,000 calorie surplus, only a small portion of those calories will be used to create muscle and a larger portion will be stored as fat. Whereas if you were to eat like 200 calories over your surplus, a much larger portion of those calories will be used to create muscle and a significantly smaller will be stored as fat. So that's primarily the difference between lean bulking and dirty bulking. It's not just what you're eating, it's also how much you're eating. So at this point, you're probably thinking, well, obviously lean bulk is the obvious choice. Well, I do recommend doing a lean bulk. However, there is one very specific scenario where I wouldn't necessarily recommend a dirty bulk, but I would recommend eating maybe a little bit more calories than you think you need to. And that is if you're a complete beginner in the gym and you're really skinny, then maybe you can increase your calories. Instead of eating like 500 over your maintenance, you can do closer to 1,000. And the idea here is that untrained individuals have better nutrient partitioning, which again means they're able to build more muscle. And that's why, we have this whole newbie gain phase. It's just because when untrained individuals gain weight, a large portion of that weight is going to be muscle regardless of, what they're eating, assuming they have a good training program, just because they're more prone to put on lean muscle tissue as a result of being a beginner. So that basically explains what bulking is, the 2 different types of bulking. So now I just want to talk about why do you even need to bulk in the first place. But to understand why you actually should bulk, I just want to quickly touch upon how exactly you build muscle, just because you need to understand the basics of how to build muscle in order to understand why exactly you should bulk up. So building muscle is known as a signaling dependent process, which just means if you provide your body with the right signals, you will build muscle regardless of how many calories you eat. At this point, you're probably thinking, well, why do I even need to bulk up? Well, number one, bulking just makes it easier to hit these signals. And from my perspective, I like to think of these signals as your training, your recovery, and your fuel. So basically what you're doing in the gym, what you're doing outside of the gym, and what you're eating throughout the day. So in order to actually grow muscle, you need to damage your muscle fibers in order for them to fuse together and grow back stronger. And the process of them, getting stronger is is called muscle hypertrophy, which is just the enlargement of the muscle cell itself. And your muscles contain hundreds of different muscle fibers, and when you work out, you're basically just damaging them so that they can grow back stronger through this process known as muscle hypertrophy. Now, in order to actually build muscle and get stronger, you need to apply a concept known as progressive overload, which basically means that you need to continuously apply stress on your muscles beyond what they've adapted to. And you can do it just by adding weight, adding reps, adding another set. But in order for your muscle fibers to actually grow back stronger, you need to give them rest. So I don't recommend training your chest 7 times a week. You need to have some off days because that is where the muscle growth occurs. But basically, your recovery is just about managing your sleep, managing your stress levels, and what you're doing outside of the gym. So if you're stretching, if you're foam rolling, and basically just giving your body time to recover. And finally, the last signal for muscle growth is fuel. So this is just basically what you're eating, what you're drinking. I'll get into the nutrient portion a little bit later into this video to kind of talk about what you should be eating and how much you should be eating. But yeah, obviously you need to eat healthy and eat enough protein in order to build muscle. All right, so now we know how to build muscle. So why should we actually bulk? Well, bulking simply makes it easier to kind of hit these signals. So if you're eating more carbs. I'll talk a little bit more about carbs later in the video again when I talk about nutrition, but carbs are basically your body's main energy source. So if you're eating more carbs, you have more energy. Obviously, as you gain weight, you're gonna lift heavier, you're gonna get stronger, you're gonna progressively overload quicker. And as you progressively overload quicker, you're applying more mechanical tension onto your muscles, which is basically the force applied on your muscles under resistance. So as you apply more mechanical tension, which is one of the main drivers of muscle hypertrophy, you're just gonna build muscle quicker. You're also gonna be able to eat more protein, which means you have more amino acids available. So bulking also maximizes muscle protein synthesis, which is just basically a process of how your body binds amino acids into skeletal muscle. Whereas if you're in a calorie deficit, you might actually promote muscle protein breakdown, which is just the exact opposite. It's taking that skeletal muscle fiber you already have and breaking it down into amino acids. So providing your body with the energy it needs is obviously great for these signals. And bulking up is just a very easy and effective way to build new muscle. And not to mention, some people are just skinny, they just don't have a lot of muscle, and they just want to gain weight, you know, to look fuller, to look a little bit more defined. And that's totally fine. If that's you, if that's why you want to bulk up, that is an extremely valid reason, and that should be why you need to bulk up. So now you know what bulking is, you know why you should do it. Now let's just talk about when you should actually start. If you're really lean, you're really skinny, you want to put on muscle, then you should bulk up. But if you're not lean, you have a lot of fat, even if you don't have a lot of muscle, then you should not bulk up. Fats basically soak up a lot of nutrients. So if you have more body fat, more excess fat is going to be created just because your nutrient partitioning is worse. So what I would recommend is going into a calorie deficit if you're extremely overweight or if you have a lot of unnecessary fat that you want to get rid of. But if you're under around like 12 to 15% body fat with very little muscle, then I would recommend bulking, no question. And the reason you don't really need to cut, even if you have, you know, maybe a little bit of puppy fat, is just because you've got no muscle to reveal. And again, as an untrained individual, you're more prone to put on lean muscle. So even though you're not losing any fat, most of that new weight you're putting on is going to be muscle. So all that added muscle will just make you look more defined, and you'll probably look leaner than you did before, as opposed to just having no muscle and some fat. Now you have more muscle and still the same amount of fat. So it's pretty easy to determine when you should actually start bulking, but it's just a little bit trickier to tell when you should stop. Now, what I recommend is when you reach a little over 20% body fat, that is when you should call it quits. And there's a few reasons behind this, but for most seasoned lifters, this is kind of when, you know, you start to lose complete visibility of your abs. And for an untrained individual, and you know, maybe you don't have abs, this is the point where you start to look a little bit puffy and you've got fat in places that you just don't want that much fat. Now, a few reasons why you should stop bulking before you get a little bit too chunky. Number one, you're gonna have a higher insulin resistance, which basically means your muscles are less responsive to insulin. And insulin actually provides amino acids to the muscle. So if you're less sensitive to insulin, you're not gonna be able to create as much new muscle. As I've mentioned multiple times throughout the video, as you gain fat, those fats will soak up more nutrients than muscle does, and then you'll start to build on even more fat than you need to, because more of those excess calories will be stored as fat rather than being used to create new muscle. So not only does bulking get less productive as you get heavier, but it also gets more difficult, and that's because as you gain weight, your maintenance calories will increase, so you're gonna need to keep eating more and more and more to keep gaining weight, and at some point your calories will just get a little bit too high. It'll just get hard to eat. You won't like eating that much food. Diet fatigue will start to set in, and you'll just be sick of eating at that point. But at the end of the day, it's your choice when to stop bulking. I just recommend look at yourself in the mirror. If you're satisfied with the amount of muscle you put on, if you think you've gained enough weight, then you should probably stop bulking. Now, the biggest question here is how long does it usually take to get to this point? What I recommend is 6 to 12 months of consistent bulking is probably what you're gonna aim for. A minimum of around 6 months is pretty normal, just because you don't want to bulk for like 2 months, because then you're not really giving yourself enough time to build as much mass as possible. But again, if you're going anything more than like a year, maybe even a year and a half, diet fatigue will start to set in, your nutrient partitioning will go down, your insulin sensitivity will also go down, your resistance will increase, and then bulking just becomes less productive. So now you're finally set on bulking, you know what it is, you know why you should do it, you know when you should start. All you need to know now is how do you do it. Now again, I recommend doing a lean bulk, which is a much smaller calorie surplus of around 250 to 500 calories, which is around 0.5 to 1 pound of body weight gained per week, which roughly equates to 1 to 3% of your total body weight gained per month. Again, I'll link a calorie calculator down below so you can calculate your maintenance, add those calories on. But what I would recommend, since all these calorie calculators can be a little bit inaccurate, they're not going to give you your exact caloric maintenance. So what I actually recommend is eating at your maintenance for a week, tracking your calories, and seeing what happens. So you can use pretty much any calorie tracking app. MyFitnessPal has a really good one. And basically what you want to do is you take that maintenance calories that you get from any calorie calculator you use, you eat that exact amount of calories for a week, and you track your weight every day to really see if you gain weight, if you lose weight, or if you maintain weight. If you maintain your weight, then that's actually your caloric maintenance. You can add on those 250 to 500 calories and you can start your bulk. If you actually gain weight, then congrats, you got a little head start on your bulk. You can actually eat that amount of calories. And if somehow your weight actually decreases, then you're going to need to add on more calories than you thought you would have. So instead of adding 250 to 500, maybe you add 500 to 1,000, depending on how much weight you lose. But obviously, you're just going to need to play around with the numbers, do some adjusting. Again, it's not going to be entirely accurate. You just want to try and gain 0.5 to 1 pound a week on average. Obviously, you're not going to gain exactly 1 pound every week. You just want to make sure that you're not gaining 10 pounds in a month and you're not gaining, half a pound in 2 months. And as I said before, if you are a complete beginner, you might want to go for a little bit higher of a surplus. So maybe around 500 to 750, just again, because you'll just be able to put on a little bit more lean muscle tissue than a trained individual would. Now, once you've got this number, you want to try and eat that many calories every day until at some point you stop gaining weight. And again, that's just because as you gain more body weight, your maintenance calories will increase. And at some point, if you keep eating the exact same amount of calories every day, your weight will plateau. So every so often, maybe every week or two, maybe increase your portion sizes, start eating 1.5 cups of rice instead of just 1 cup of rice. And that way you can continue gaining weight and just keep making progress. So that pretty much covers how to bulk up. The only portion left of this video is nutrition. This is probably what most people want to hear. And I just want to cover some basics of nutrition. Obviously, I'm not a dietitian. I'm not here to write you a meal plan. I just want to kind of talk about, what I recommend. So when it comes to food, there's 6 essential nutrients. You've got your macronutrients, including your protein, carbs, and fat. And then you've got your micronutrients, which include the vitamins and minerals. And then you've got water. So protein is the main building blocks of muscles. Carbs are our body's main energy source. And fats will promote cell growth, lower our risk of diseases, and basically keep our body functioning. Now, a lot of people think when it comes to building muscle, all you have to do is just eat enough protein, protein. And while, there is some truth to that, obviously protein is the building block of muscle. You want to make sure you have a well-balanced diet because again, if you're not eating enough carbs, you won't have enough energy. You won't be able to lift as heavy in the gym. And if you're not eating fat, you're just not going to be healthy. So you really want to consume adequate amounts of each. Most people recommend a diet of around 20 to 30% of your total calories from protein, 20 to 30% of your total calories from fat, and around 40 to 60% from carbs. So let's say you choose to eat 30% protein, 20% fat, and 50% carbs. So on a 2,000 calorie diet, that would equate to around 600 calories of protein, 400 calories of fat, and 1,000 calories of carbs. Now, since protein contains 4 calories per gram, 600 calories of protein is 150 grams, and carbs is the exact same thing. So 1,000 calories of carbs is going to be 250 grams, and fat actually contains 9 calories per gram. So 400 calories of fat is 45 grams. So on a 2,000 calorie diet, you're eating 150 grams of protein, 45 grams of fat, and 250 grams of carbs. Now, a lot of people recommend eating 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, and that's actually something I recommend as well. And the 20 to 30% of protein of your total calories kind of falls within that range anyway. And the reason I recommend kind of a high protein intake is simply because protein is a very safe macronutrient to kind of overeat. It's not really going to cause any problems, and eating too little can actually be less efficient just because muscle protein synthesis is necessary in order to build muscle, and obviously you need enough protein for that to occur. So eating less could potentially limit your gains, while eating more isn't really going to do any harm. So finally, into the portion of the video you guys have been waiting for. Here are some good food choices when it comes to protein, carbs, and fat. Now, with proteins, you want to focus on high quality proteins, which contain all 9 essential amino acids. Essential amino acids are basically those that cannot be created in the body. They need to be supplemented through your diet, and most animal products will contain all 9 essential amino acids. So these are your lean ground beef, lean turkey, chicken, steak, any sort of fish like salmon, tuna, cod even is a good one. Eggs and dairy products will also contain all 9 essential amino acids. Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, these are all great choices for protein. Obviously, there's much more out there. These are just some of the ones that I use in my diet. And if you're finding it difficult to get enough protein in, I would recommend using a protein supplement. Whey protein is a great one. Whey protein is actually a byproduct from the process of making cheese. Basically, there's like a watery portion of protein that separates from the mixture when you're making cheese, and that portion is known as whey, and then it's isolated, combined with other proteins and some flavoring, made into a powder, and out comes your protein. It's relatively cheap. It's really easy to supplement. You can down like 3 shakes a day if you're really struggling on your protein intake. Obviously, I recommend eating whole foods first. I wouldn't necessarily recommend a diet entirely consisting consisted of whey protein shakes. However, they are a great supplement to your diet and they will definitely help. I actually have one right there. This is My Proteins The Whey Vanilla Ice Cream. It's actually really good. You can use my code MAXE for a 45% discount on any product on the site. Again, if you're struggling to get your protein in, or if you just want some really high quality, good tasting protein, then any sort of whey protein on the My Protein website is going to be good. And as a matter of fact, I'm actually currently running a giveaway on my Instagram for $150 worth of my protein products that you can spend on whatever you like. I recommend the My Pro range because their products are awesome. But all you have to do is like the post, follow My Protein US and My Pro, tag one friend in the comments, and I'll choose a winner in exactly 48 hours from when this video goes live. But without any further ado, let's get back to the video. In terms of when you should eat your protein, I would recommend splitting your protein and spreading it out throughout the day. So around 20 to 40 grams of protein per meal if you can. And that's just because muscle protein synthesis spikes multiple times throughout the day. So in order to capitalize on that muscle protein synthesis, you just want to spread out your protein intake. You also want to make sure you're consuming protein after your workout just because there's a slight elevation in muscle protein synthesis. But again, as long as you're eating it throughout the day, you'll be fine. On to the carbohydrate portion. Now with carbs, you want to focus on eating whole grain carb sources, which just means they contain the entire kernel. They haven't been stripped of any nutrients. So like refined grain carbs are stripped of the fiber. You also want to understand complex carbs versus simple carbs. Now every carbohydrate is basically made of some combination of starch, fiber, and sugar, and complex carbs will have more starch and fiber, whereas simple carbs will just have a lot more sugar. And so the more complex the carb is, the more nutrients it's going to contain, and the less overall sugar it's going to have. So this is like potatoes, rice, pasta, as opposed to like donuts and cookies. Now similar to protein, the timing of when you eat your carbs does kind of matter, just because carbs supply you with energy, so you want to make sure you have some in your system before your workout. You want to eat low glycemic index carbs like 1 to 3 hours before your workout, and the glycemic index is just a measure of how fast your body converts glucose into energy. So low glycemic index means it's a much slower process, which is why I recommend 1 to 3 hours before a workout. So this is like oats and fruit, but if you can only eat like an hour before your workout, then you want to include high glycemic index carbs so the body absorbs those carbs much more rapidly. But as a general recommendation, you don't want to eat too much added sugar. So obviously you want to eat carbs before your workout to supply your body with energy, and you also want to eat carbs after your workout to kind of replenish those glycogen stores that have been depleted from the training. But it doesn't really have to be that set in stone. It's not really that serious. As long as you're eating good carb sources just sometime throughout the day, you're going to be fine. So again, these include like rice, bread, pasta, oats, and I'm sure there's just a ton of other options out there. Again, you're not limited to what I recommend. And finally, on to fats. Fats again are 9 calories per gram, so they're much more calorie dense. They're very efficient to eat because you don't have to eat a lot of them to get a lot of calories. I do recommend sticking to unsaturated fats if you can, just because saturated fats are linked to a couple different diseases. So these include like nuts, peanut butter, avocados. Nuts are really convenient to snack on, and peanut butter is just super easily combined with other foods. If you want to spread it on toast, dip it with fruit, mix it in your oatmeal, put it in your protein shake, it can literally be eaten with everything. And if you're allergic to peanut butter, just try a different alternative. I'm sure there's hundreds of different ones out there. But in terms of nutrition, all you really have to focus on is protein and calories. I know I said that building muscle isn't all about eating protein, and it's not, but as long as you're eating enough protein and you're getting, some carb and fat sources throughout the day, and you're meeting somewhere close to your total calorie goals, then you're gonna be fine. But that wraps up pretty much everything you need to know about nutrition and pretty much everything you need to know about bulking. So as a quick recap, if you want to gain weight, you need to be in a calorie surplus. If you're not in a calorie surplus, you won't gain weight. And if you're not gaining weight, you're not in a calorie surplus. If that's the case, then you just need to eat more. Even if you think you're eating a lot already, even if you think you have a high metabolism, you just need to eat more. But overall, just be patient, eat enough protein, eat a well-balanced diet, make sure you're working hard inside and outside the gym, and most importantly, just enjoy the process. Understand what you're getting yourself into, understand what needs to be done, put in the work to get to where you want to be consistent, and I promise you will see results. But that's it for this video. I'm not even sure how long I've sat here recording this. My phone died, the video stopped recording like 4 times. This is probably the most informative video I will ever create, just because I get so many questions on, how do I start bulking? What do I need to do to bulk? What should I eat? All those questions. So hopefully I answered pretty much everything you can think of. But yeah, I'm really sorry for the lack of uploads recently. I've been pretty busy with school, which is why, I upload so inconsistently now. But if you do kind of want to keep up with my day-to-day life, then you can follow me over on Instagram. I do post daily stories on there. I do plan on recording a full day of eating soon. I feel like I've said that so many times now. But now that the bulk is coming to an end, I do need to record that soon because I do want to do a full day of eating on the bulk. But I hope this video answers all the questions you may have had. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.